Hey y'all, welcome to the internet. This is Avery, and today we're going to make a shape using vector-based image editing software, so Figma or Illustrator. Then we're going to take that shape into Blender, which is a 3D modeling and animating software, and we're going to extrude that shape, and then we're going to animate it. And then we're going to take that animation information and composite it and make an animated GIF. Dope. So let's start in Figma, and I can show you how the type of shape we need to make. I'll also demonstrate it in Illustrator. So in Figma, for example, I can just make a line, using Shift P to bring up the pencil tool. And then the stroke on this line, for example, let me select this so we can adjust the stroke. We can thicken the stroke, but I do want to point out, right, this is not actually a shape. This is a line with stroke information. In order to get a shape, a real shape with points and composed solely of points and lines, we need to outline this. So with it selected, we hit right click, then we outline the stroke, and now if I go and hit enter to go into this edit mode, you can see here that I have this information, point information. Say, for example, that you've also created a rectangle somewhere in your composition. We'll change this fill, fill, to black. And so now, yes, it looks like it's one thing, but it's actually composed of two different shapes. So we need to union those. So come here, union selection, but not only do we have the union selection, if I hit enter, you'll see it's still two things, right? We actually want one thing. So after you do the union, you want to flatten the selection. So now when I come into it, it's one thing, and you can see, for example, I can move these points and it affects, right, both of those. Great. So now we're ready to go to take this into Blender. How you would do that is go to export. Make sure just your shape is selected when you hit export. Instead of a PNG, we want an SVG. Can you all see that? You can't. SVG, so that's all down here. Let me get my head out of the way. So all this is this PNG, SVG information, and then we want to export that. And then here's a pop-up, so I'm on a Windows instead of a PC, or I'm on a Windows instead of a Mac, so it looks a little different. You just test where you want to, select where you want to do it, enter, Avery shape, whatever you want to call it, just so you know how to find it later, and hit save. And so now you have an SVG on your computer that you can find later when you're going into Blender. In Illustrator, so I'm in Illustrator now. Very similar process. So this is slightly different tools though. So if I hit in, I'm going to make sure I did Shift X to switch the fill and the stroke. I don't want a stroke. I also, with N, which is my pencil tool, hit enter to make that, make sure fill new pencil strokes. Okay, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it this way. Hit enter. Don't fill new pencil strokes so I can demonstrate the same thing to you. So I make a shape similar to the shape that I made in Figma, right? So it is actually not a shape. It's a line. It's anchor points and paths that are connected, and they are stroked, but they are not, whatchamacallit, they are not a shape. So how do you get a shape in Illustrator? You make sure it's selected. You go to Object, Expand. Yep. Do that, and then here we go. If I go to my direct selection tool, hitting A, I can select these anchor points, and you can see the effects that I can have. And then similarly, if we want to connect something to this, I'll hit M for my rectangle tool, make a connection, and hit V. I just want to, just a little something here. So this is my shape. But right now, we have two different shapes. How do we combine them in Illustrator? If they're overlapping like this, we can come here to Pathfinder, which is this in the panel right here, and very simply union those. So now if I hit A, my direct selection tool, I can come here and effect change. That will adjust both of these. Blammo. All right, so this one is similar. You can, in Illustrator, you can right-click to export an asset. So come down here, you export your selection. This window will come up. Right in this window, you can name this thing. So if you double-click there, you can do Avery shape to use. Just make sure I know which one I want. Hit enter. Right here is where you select where it's going to go. I'm just going to put it on my desktop. Yep, select that folder. By default, this would usually be selected to create a subfolder. I don't need that. And then you can see here is format where you change it. So SVG is what you want. Don't worry about adding scale. And then y'all export asset. Blammo. There we go. And it opened up and you can see it's right here. So now let's go into Blender. So this is what you'll see. Splash screen. Welcome to Blender. Welcome to Blender, y'all. I'll be using 3.3. You probably will, I don't know. You might have a later version or earlier version depending on when you watch this tutorial. But this is a splash screen. You can click out of it. You can also bring it up by clicking up here. I don't know why necessarily you'd want to bring the splash screen up, but just so you know. So Blender is 3D, right? It's 2D, but it's 3D. We're going to explore virtual three-dimensional space. So, it's illusory for sure, but we can navigate it as we would, as if we were, gods or angels or just birds, I don't know, flying around. So, this I'll explain to you. You can see there's some information. If you look down here, it's going to change when I hover over it. But if you look down here, when I come back, there are some indicators of how to navigate, what tools you can use. And this changes constantly depending on what tools you have up. So it's a great little UI helpful thing for you if you want to use it. But I'll just go over it really quickly. So 3-button mouse, which I highly recommend. You'll have them in a computer lab, but at home, I think you should get your own. If you just do the scroll wheel back and forth, that zooms in and out. If you click and hold the scroll wheel, you can navigate, sort of like rotate around in this 3D space, and it should lock to anything that you have selected. And then if you want to pan, you hold down Shift and click and hold the mouse wheel, the center mouse wheel, and that's how you pan around. So what happens by default when you open Blender is you have a cube, you have a light right here. You can notice what happens when I select on them, what the changes in this outliner, and you have a camera. Cube, camera, light, all here in our selection. So we can click and drag to select all of them. You can see they're all highlighted. Wow, pretty neat. What you might want to think you can do is just kind of click and drag to move things. You can't. We'll go over that later. Actually, I'll tease it out right now. Moving things in Blender, you can select the Move tool. So that allows you to move things. Also, you can just hit G on your keyboard, click once. G on your keyboard moves things around, and then you click to lock it in. All right. So G, and then you just move your mouse around, and then you click. To confirm, that's a left click. G to move. If you right click, that cancels the move. You'll get used to Blender, don't worry. It's a lot of information right now, but that's just to tease some of the functionality and how to navigate it. Mostly just to be like, you can't click here and move this thing. I'm so sorry. All right. Now, let's set our camera for setting up our scene that we're going to rotate our shape within. Extrude and then rotate the shape. So we want to make sure our camera is selected. And we want to move it to a position essentially so that we're like looking at this cube, and then we'll replace the cube with our shape. So got the camera selected. We want to bring up this information or like the location, rotation information about the camera. To do that, it's actually, real quick while I'm here, another area where you can navigate is this little widget. So if you click here, click and hold and move it around, you can also lock it to different positions. Say if I click on X, it locks to looking down the X axis. Click on Y, it looks down the Y axis. Pretty cool, right? Yeah. Whew. Okay. Now come here and you can see what happens if just this little arrow right here, you see that? Or just like a sideways V. If you click that, whoop, it pops open this transform menu. And then you have some other things here. This is actually called the in menu, because if you hit in on your keyboard, it opens it up, closes it down. So we want the location of our camera right now to be 0. I'm gonna hit tab 0. I'm gonna hit tab 0. And then we want the rotation along the x-axis to be 90. So it's looking kind of down the x-axis. It's not looking straight down. Looking sort of down to the ground. It's looking along the y. We want the y to be 0. We want the z to be 0 currently right now. So if I hit enter, you can see my camera sort of poking out right here. I want to scooch it that way along the y, so I can hover over my location right here, and you can see that the cursor switches, and it's saying, hey, do you want to drag? You want to change this? So you can click and drag. So I'm clicking and dragging right now, and I'm going to click and drag it back. Dope. So what is the camera seeing? Let's find out. Come here to this right here. This little indicator is the toggle the camera view. So it toggles to the camera view. So if you click that, now this is what the camera sees. Sweet. And then the last thing, so this is it's what the camera sees, but it's not what the software is going to render. To see what the software is going to render, you hit the rendered. Hold on one second. Yeah, Beckett. You good? Okay, love you. Click right here and you'll see rendered. And there's really not much to see because right now we have one light source that I'm going to click and rotate. One light source that is actually only illuminating this side of it. And it's a sort of this grayish white cube. There's really not much information there. I'll just show you really quick. I can take my light source. I can either hit the move tool or remember, hit G. I'm going to hit G and then just kind of move my light. Oh, and you can see it's affecting change. Oh my. So I'll just leave it right there for now. I'll come here, look at the camera again. Cool. So there are some things that we're going to do to just get our SVG in here and extrude it. So I'm going to destroy this cube. I'm going to close this in menu right here by hitting in. And then I'm going to work my way down these menus. Okay, down this, this is called the outliner, I believe. No, the properties. This is the properties. This is the outliner up here. So this little icon right here means properties. And so we're going to go down these different property menus and do a bunch of things. So stick with me. I'm going to go fairly quickly, but this is a recording, so you can always rewind. First, let's destroy this cube. So this is the default cube. To destroy things in Blender, it's not backspace or delete. You make sure you have your thing selected, and you hit X, and it says, do you want to delete it? And you say, hell yeah. Now what we're going to do is we have our cursor right here. This is our 3D cursor. We're going to import an SVG that will land right on this space. So File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics right here, SVG. There's another SVG as Grease Pencil. We don't want that. We want Scalable Vector Graphics right there. This window will pop up. Navigate to where yours is. Remember, Avery, shape to use. There it is, SVG, cool. Import that SVG. Where is it? Well, we know it's here because look, it created what are these things called? A bucket, a collection. We created a collection with a curve, and the curve is our SVG. So within that collection, if you select this curve and then scale, and to scale, you have a scale tool right here, but you need to use the keyboard shortcut. So hit S and then pull out. If you pulling to the right scales it proportionally and sort of in the right direction, but I'll show you if you go the other direction, like switch it out, you can kind of like flip your shape, right? If that makes sense. So make sure you pull to the right. And then there's your shape. You see, it's kind of magical. If this is the kind of magic you're into. Let's look at our camera. We can't see it, right? We set up our camera at no elevation on the plane, the XY plane, so there's no elevation on that Z axis. So we can't see it because this SVG landed flat on that XY plane. So we know we still have it selected. Let's rotate it up along the X so that we can see it. R is rotate, so it's when it's selected. If you hit R, rotate, and you can start to actually like just kind of rotate the thing around. And you can kind of barely make out, there's like a little indication that there's some dots there. Right now it's rotating along the Y. Because we're looking along the Y, by default, Blender will just rotate along the axis you're like looking along. So let's hit X, and then we can rotate our jammer up. And I'm going to hit 90, because I want it to be perfectly along, the, flipping 90 degrees up along the X-axis. And then, so I typed in 90, and then to just like confirm that, I'll hit Enter. So I'll zoom out a little bit. By the way, when you click this, you might know this, but the light gray area is what you're looking through in the camera. The dark gray is outside of the frame of the camera. A little bit more, we're getting there. This is going to all go very quickly once we get there. So you have your shape selected, and let's see what I want to do next. is just kind of change the position of it. Right now, you can see it's not really like lined up along its anchor point. If I hit rotate for the shape again, you can kind of see where the rotation point is, right? I can hit Z, rotate along the Z axis. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to rotate our shape along the Z axis. So we kind of want it to rotate along more of the central felt axis. You know, this like kind of like if this were a square, the symmetry, the center axis of that, the horizontal axis. So in order to move its sort of like orientation point, we can actually move. As an alarm, we can actually move all of the anchor point information, sort of rearrange how its relationship to this orientation point, if that all makes sense. So in order to do that, we're going to go from object mode, where we are right now, into edit mode. Again, this is like sort of advanced. It's not even advanced, but it's kind of a lot to take in. But we're doing it. So if you click Tab, that is the quick keyboard way to switch between object mode and edit mode. Tab. Now we're in edit mode. And you can see this looks very much like Illustrator or Figma, right? You have paths and you have anchor points. You have lines and you have anchor points. We want to select all of our anchor points that compose this shape. So A selects everything. And you can see it. We even have the kind of Bezier information here. I mean, we could even alter these if we want by hitting G, because on G we can move this stuff. But I'm not going to. I hit escape to cancel that. A to select everything, and then I just need to scooch it a little bit, right? I just need to scooch it along the x-axis. So G to move, and I start to scooch it. If I want to lock it to an axis, hit X to lock it to the X, and then let's just kind of move it right there. Boop. And then I hit Tab to get out. Now it's object mode. Now I'm in object mode, out of edit mode. So if I hit R to rotate and Z, you can see we're rotating along this point. This point becomes the sort of the center point, the vertical axis along which we rotate. Okay, now we can make some adjustments, fix everything, and extrude this jammer. Are you ready to come over to the property panel? Let's do it. So let's start at the top here. The first thing we're rendering, yes, using Eevee is the render engine. It's great, but we want to make a couple changes to make it look a little bit better. It's a very fast render engine, but it needs some help to make it look the most ideal. All this is good. We want to allow ambient occlusion. We want to allow bloom. That's sort of when there's a light in the scene and it bounces off of something that's somewhat reflective. There's just kind of like these pixels kind of fuzz out, and it looks nice, pretty cinematic. We also want to add motion blur. That'll make it so when our shape is spinning, it looks a little bit more realistic, right? Because there's motion blur when things move in camera, but in 3D animation, it's all virtual. It's all fake cameras, digital cameras, virtual cameras. So it's not an artifact of a digital animation, but we can make it one so that it looks more realistic. Sweet. That's all you need in this first render properties panel. Now let's come down to output. So stay with me here. X, we want to make a square frame. So 800 pixels by 800 pixels. Lovely. 24 frames per second right here is great. We want it to end at 96, so 4 seconds, right? So 24 times 4 is 96. 4 seconds. God, I hope I'm doing that right. Yes, that's right. I've just totally got... Anyway, math. So 96. So our frame start is 1. Our frame end is 96. That's great. So we are making a 4-second animation. Output is important because this is going to determine where our files go, and we want to know where they go so that we can call them later when we're composing our animated GIF. By default, it'll go to a temporary folder. We don't want that. We want to know where things are. So I'm actually going to put mine in my desktop. I'm going to come and make a new folder. So right here, this icon means new folder. And then this is going to be spin that. Come on, just write it out, Evo. Spin that shape. We're not done yet. All we did was name a folder. Now we double click into that folder and then Avery shape. So this will be the beginning of the beginning like file name of every file you make. And then I like to add a dot at the end because it will, as it makes the 96 files, it'll go 001, 002, 003, you get it. So having a dot at the end is great. And it just like helps make it easier when you're doing a sequential image sequence animation. Right. So Avery shape. Oh, it looks like it defaults to, because I put dot, but to change it, look at that. It changed it to an underscore. So I guess that's what it wants. So hit accept. Maybe that's better. You can leave it as a PNG. That's fine. All this is fine. Let's go to the next one. Don't need to do anything here. We don't need to do anything in units. What we do want to do here is world properties, right? World properties. So this one is how you change what your scene looks like. So you can change the color of your scene. I'll do green, and then right here is the tone. So if it's the tint and shadow, so if it's lighter or darker, so more black, more white. The love that quality of the hue can be affected here. And you can just play around with that. I'm gonna leave it at this. I can't know. What do I want? Oh, I kind of like that. I'm stick with that. And then that's done. Nothing here. The next big thing is all the way down here, object data properties. So this, my friends, is our opportunity to extrude this jammer. So come down here, we want geometry. Open that by clicking it, and all we need to do is extrude. So I'm going to come back in here. This is called the 3D viewport. I'm going to hold down the middle scroll wheel so that I can get a sense, like get a sort of side view of my shape. And I'm going to start extruding. You can see it's like fairly dramatic, even though it says it's only 0.02 of a meter. It is, if this shape, for example, if I look in the properties, if this shape is 2 meters tall, that doesn't feel accurate to me because it looks like it's almost already at a meter here, if you know what I'm saying. I can't explain it, but that's just it already says it's don't even worry about it, but just know that if you want to be more nuanced, that you have to add zeros, and then you can get a shape that looks like that. Great. So extrude in geometry within the object data properties menu. And then just in case you were changing the world properties and you didn't see a difference, remember to switch to viewport shading rendered right up here. And then that'll get you all of this. Lovely. Now let's come back into camera view. Realize we need to move our shape. So with the shape selected, hit G. And you can move it down. And you can even see, if you see that little yellow dot right there, that is the dot, that's the origin point around which it will rotate. So I hit R and Z to rotate. Cool. Now, dudes, let's change the color of our shape. So that is in this bottom one that looks like a beach ball. You can see it right there. It is the material properties. And by default, when you bring in an SVG, it has an SVG matte, an SVG material. Let's annihilate that. So hit this negative, this minus symbol right here. And it's gone. And then we can add a new material. So with the new material, so again, that's hitting the plus is to add a new material. Nope, it's not a new material. To add a new material is to hit new. And then you can come here to the base color. So click right in the middle of this color, and you have the same opportunity to affect change here. Ooh, so I'm going to go, I kind of like this red-yellow combination. And then I'll open this up a little bit so you can see it more clearly. So in your material properties, if you can see that right there, you can change a lot of different things. So subsurface, you can turn that up. And that is sort of like the light scattering below the surface. So skin, for example, like light scatters below the skin. And you can change that color and sort of see the slight differences that makes into the look of your shape. Oops. You can also, what are the big ones that make change? Metallic, right? Sort of adds a shimmeriness to your shape. It's best shown to like see a light moving around it, right? So there's metallic. But if I come back to my shape, say for example, if I drop the roughness, Ooh, that makes the metallic like super shiny, right? So let me move this light around again so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You can even get a sense of what the bloom does in terms of making the light sort of blur out. Neat. So you can change, mess with that on back of the shape and the material properties. All of these are things to play with and mess with. Add a little roughness, just and have fun. You know, some things that you won't really notice a difference, and other things like, for example, if I up the admission, that won't really do anything unless I change the emission color. So you can play with it, but I think the ones that you'll be most satisfied with are metallic, roughness, and that's probably it unless you want to add some subsurface. I'm going to drop my subsurface. I don't want it. Sweet. So we have an extruded shape with a color, and we have a camera here. So I'll click on the camera view, looking at the shape. Now let's animate this shape. So, and again, totally feel free to move your lights around if you want. I should also say right now you can change the color of your light. So when the light is selected, this object data properties icon, it shifts. So now it looks like a little light bulb. If you click on that, you can change the color of these things to whatever whatever you see fit. But the dominant color in the scene will be the yellow because it's the ever-present yellow that the world is composed of. Let's animate this jammer. So I'm going to pull up this window right here so you can see a little bit better. So we have a frame start at 1. We have a frame end at 96. We're at the first frame, so this is our playhead. You can see we're at frame 1. We want to make sure we have our shape selected. So there's our shape. It's selected when it's highlighted yellow. And what we're going to do is hit I on the keyboard, I, and this is going to insert a keyframe. So we need a keyframe to mark the position of our shape in the beginning at frame 1. So we'll hit rotation. So I, and then we're doing a rotation keyframe. That's all we need for this. And then we're going to come not just to our last frame. So I can drag this and it'll go, all the way to 96, or I can click this to get to our last frame. We actually want to go to 97 because we're going to rotate 360 degrees, and we don't want to have the first frame and the last frame be the same position. So we need to go one frame past. So we can come here and go to 97. We have our shape selected. We can actually open up our transform properties, and you can say this is highlighted green because it's essentially indicating to you that, hey, you have your shape selected. Back at frame 1, which you'll see it changes color, you inserted a keyframe. So do you want to enter a new keyframe now that you've moved your playhead to a new position? And heck yeah, we do. We actually want to rotate this thing 360 degrees. So again, in to bring this up, we want to rotate along the Z axis, the vertical axis, so 360 degrees, blam. And it's not locked in yet. What we need to do is actually hover back over here in this area, hit I on our keyboard, do a rotation keyframe, and now if I come here and hit play, I mean, that's it. I did it. But do you see how this rotation or this animation kind of like slowly speeds up, hits a certain pace, and then slowly seats down to its beginning position? I want this to just like smoothly rotate with none of that animation curve information. So in order to do that, we hover over here. Watch out, get that out of the way. We hover over here in our timeline, and we hit V on a keyboard, V. And now, if you look here, we can change the set keyframe handle type. We set the keyframe handle type to vector. And now if I hit either the play button or spacebar, it just goes smoothly for forever. Dope. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so I have my camera selected, and I know I'm on the camera location is adjusted on the Y, so I can come up here to Y, and I can just pull it out just a little bit. I can also, move my light around. If you need to like sort of see where your light is to make sure it's ahead of it, you can see mine's right here. If I want to move it like a little bit closer, right? Move it there. That's hitting G. You can see it right here in the little indicator. Play with it. You're going to get like lost. We're already almost to 30 minutes for this, so I kind of need to stop. But this is a lot of great information to get you started in Blender. So now to export this thing. I'll just remind you on output properties, remember one frame start. Now, the biggest thing is we know where it's going. So this hitting this window and output, we know where these files are going to save to. So file, nope, not file. Render animation, and then watch what happens. It's rendering. And it's going really quickly. Eevee is a fast render engine. So I'm just going to let it sit here because we're almost done. Oh, Sugarfoot, we're past it. We're past 30 minutes. But you've learned a lot. Okay, so in Photoshop, now we have an image sequence that we can call to and composite. Or call to? Open? Open. Not this one. This was a test. In Desktop, or wherever you saved it, I did spin that shape. It's a folder. Here's my image sequence. I would select you can see now this is sequential numbering is really useful. Select your first one, just one. Come down here to image sequence. It'll look different on a Mac, but it's the same thing. Same window. Image sequence is what you want to select. And then hit open. And then this window will pop up. And yes, we want 24 frames per second, right? And here we go. So in case you don't see the timeline, that's here. So it might open up like this and nothing will happen. But if you bring up timeline, and then if you come here to this little gear icon, you can just make sure it's at loop playback so that you can get a sense, if I hit space, what it's going to look like. Absolutely lovely. Now we're going to export this GIF. So File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. It's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. Let me make this a little bit smaller so you all can see. So this is it. So hit save, not done. And then this window will pop up. Just know where you want to save it. I'll put it on my desktop. Avery, spin that shape, and it will save as a GIF. It's saving, it's saving, it's saving, it's thinking, it's done. So now if I go to my desktop, I have a GIF file. How will this open? Yeah, there it is. There's my GIF. And then you'll upload this to share with your friends and your family. All right, that's it, y'all, for real. That's how you make an animated GIF from an SVG. 30 minutes of love. I'll see you next time.